Trump is going to decide by the time this thing is over. He'll be broke.
Just found out my daughter shares a birthday with Obama. Puke in caps at Mom of Four Munchkins. Barack Obama dances like how his jeans look. You know, this jeans thing, this is so old. This was years ago, come on. My mom bought new conditioner and it sucks. It isn't even conditioning my hair. I blame Obama. Barack Obama. Bro, do you even lift? Well, I lifted the ban on Cuban cigars. That's worth something. Barack Obama is the Barack Obama is the Sharknado of presidents. Loud, stupid, and overhyped. Hashtag Sharknado 4. President Obama will go down as perhaps the worst president in the history of the United States! Exclamation point at real Donald Trump. Well, at real Donald Trump. At least I will go down as a president.
In case you didn't catch that, that was Jimmy Kimmel and President Obama. I watched the whole thing. I'll show other parts of it. We got a brother here. He's a real brother. And through all the torment of the last 8 years, you know, dealing with racism at its peak, because the day after inauguration, naturally the crackers ganged up on him, and it's well documented. And he struggled the 8 years with holding his tongue. Well, not holding his tongue, but I mean, that took patience and perseverance to actually deal with all that racism. I mean, and I went to Hawaii to see why he was so cool. But being in Hawaii, you can see how he has that tenacity. And then, you know, understanding the females that love him so, in particular Michelle Obama. We have a piece on her too, which we'll run. And I mean, I have nothing but praise for the man to get through all this stuff. I mean, to have accomplished such a feat under extraordinary odds, and I think he took a lot of flack from everybody, and in particular black people. I mean, I've always stood up hand in hand. I've been saying since day one, a blessing from God, and everybody's constantly bringing out his flaws and all the problems he's had over the years, and all the mistakes he's done. You know, we're close to 8 years now, and I have such an appreciation. I wish I had this piece that I wanted to run from 207 National Action Network. I'm going through this reveling in the, after watching Jimmy Kimmel, and you saw parts of it. I mean, this guy has come through this unafraid and made history and done an amazing job for what he was up against. And I think just as our past heroes, we talk about Malcolm and Martin and all these people are praised after they're dead and gone. But here we have a brother that's going to come out and do twice the feat he did as president as a civilian. I can see it coming. Such as the piece we ran on Minister Farrakhan. He got down on him, brother, come back to Chicago and start talking to the thugs. And we remember that he started out as a community organizer. Can you imagine him going and getting together with Farrakhan and talking peace?
Well, you're not going to get together with Minister Farrakhan, not in public. You're not going to do that. That's in my humble opinion.
Okay, that's exactly what I was asking.
Opinion.
I'm in a fantasy land.
When you
that ain't gonna happen.
When I was in corporate America, I would talk to the brothers who were in housekeeping. I talked to the messengers. I talked to guys, brothers.
Right.
And they in this particular company that I was at, they had grade levels, You know, that's a grade, they would call you a grade 7, a grade 2, whatever. I didn't even pay attention to that. I was in the managerial sales piece. And I'm saying that because
This is the
other
60s.
guys, no, I'm dealing with 70s
Okay.
to 2001.
Okay.
And there were guys who were in positions, quote, higher than mine, and the same as mine, and they took on a different persona. I mean, we would talk to one another, and then there was guys in other areas, and they wouldn't even associate with you. And what I'm saying, sometimes in those positions, you have to become what you're not. And in order to be in with the people who hire you.
Okay.
At least you think that. They don't tell you that. But this is the thing where I'm in this position, I gotta, but I
Go along
entertain.
to get along.
I entertain. So at one time they told me, they said, Baylor, you know, you have a lot of people visiting you. So they were talking about the brothers in the blue uniforms, the housekeeping brothers. So I said, okay. So I told the brothers to come after 5. I said, whenever you want to see me, come after 5, because I always work late. And that's how the traffic was.
Right.
And because I never left the consciousness of where I came from.
Right.
And I'm saying that the unsung hero is Michelle Obama.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because
Oh, man.
you know, when you look at her, she's black. This is a black woman.
Yeah.
You know, when you look into her history, she is born here in this culture. She knows our culture. She knows the history. She knows the history. When you look at her history, where she came from and her parents, then you know that she is a conscious black woman.
Okay.
So she has had to, where the guy told Obama, you're a liar, she would have thrown down. If the camera went on her, she would have said, hey, come on, say something. I'm talking about.
Right.
She would have said that regarding, but she had to keep her mouth shut. Not she had to, excuse me.
But he had to.
Excuse me. He didn't have to. He could have told the sergeant of arms, at arms or whatnot, hey, you out of order. Because that's the
In the middle
that's
of
the
the
rules.
speech?
That the man called him a liar in the middle of his speech. So when you're out of order, it's Robert Rules of Order. That's what
Right.
we learned. Hey, you creating a nuisance on my post. I'm making a presentation. You can't compromise with snakes because they're gonna bite you anyway.
But why wouldn't that have been disruptive for him to stop in the middle of his presentation
To do
pay
that-
attention to a heckler?
That's not a heckler. That's a member of the United States Congress
But still,
who
that's
is being
heckling.
disrespectful to the office of the
But
presidency of
that's
the United
handled
States.
after you finish your
No,
presentation.
you're on national television.
Somebody
when you
sitting
let-
next to him should have grabbed him and put him out.
When you let people get away with that in front of a national audience, no one's going to respect you if you let that guy dish you like that. He should have stepped up as the commander-in-chief and said, Sergeant at Arms, remove that man, or address him for what he did, call him out on it, and shut him down.
Well,
Because we know they were conspiring from the day he came to office. They were conspiring. So he had nothing to lose.
well, since he wasn't born in our culture, see, and he was born in Hawaii, as I mentioned that earlier, he laid back and was cool about it. And amazingly, Professor Jeffrey's here. All right, you know what we're going to do? Play Obama 2. This is Michelle Obama. And we're going to get the real sister on for a minute. And then we'll talk about...
Not you, Professor. He's talking about
No, a
the
sister.
president's wife,
President's wife. All right?
the first lady.
The First Lady. Our next female president. After her. Come on, Doc.
We have a candidate for President of the United States, who over the course of his lifetime, in the course of this campaign, has said things about women that are so shocking, so demeaning, that I simply will not repeat anything here today. And last week, we saw this candidate actually bragging about sexually assaulting women. And I can't believe that I'm saying that a candidate for President of the United States has bragged about sexually assaulting women. And I have to tell you that I can't stop thinking about this. It has shaken me to my core in a way that I couldn't have predicted. So while I'd love nothing more than to pretend like this isn't happening and to come out here and do my normal campaign speech, it would be dishonest and disingenuous to me to just move on to the next thing like this was all just a bad dream. This is not something that we can ignore. It's not something we can just sweep under the rug as just another disturbing footnote in a sad election season. Because this was not just a lewd conversation. This wasn't just locker room banter. This was a powerful individual speaking freely and openly about sexually predatory behavior and actually bragging about kissing and groping women, using language so obscene that many of us were worried about our children hearing it when we turn on the TV. And to make matters worse, it now seems very clear that this isn't an isolated incident. It's one of countless examples of how he has treated women his whole life. And I have to tell you that I listen to all of this, and I feel it so personally. And I'm sure that many of you do too, particularly the women. The shameful comments about our bodies, the disrespect of our ambitions and intellect, the belief that you can do anything you want to a woman. It is cruel. It's frightening. And the truth is, it hurts. It hurts. It's like that sick, sinking feeling you get when you're walking down the street minding your own business and some guy yells out vulgar words about your body. Or when you see that guy at work that stands just a little too close, stares a little too long, and makes you feel uncomfortable in your own skin. It's that feeling of terror and violation that too many women have felt when someone has grabbed them or forced himself on them and they've said no, but he didn't listen. Something that we know happens on college campuses and countless other places every single day. It reminds us of stories we've heard from our mothers and grandmothers about how back in their day, the boss could say and do whatever he pleased to the women in the office, and even though they worked so hard, jumped over every hurdle to prove themselves, it was never enough. We thought all of that was ancient history, didn't we? And so many have worked for so many years to end this kind of violence and abuse and disrespect, but here we are in 2016, and we're hearing these exact same things every day on the campaign trail. We are drowning in it. And all of us are doing what women have always done. We're trying to keep our heads above water, just trying to get through it, trying to pretend like this doesn't really bother us. Maybe because we think that admitting how much it hurts makes us as women look weak. Maybe we're afraid to be that vulnerable. Maybe we've grown accustomed to swallowing these emotions and staying quiet because we've seen that people often won't take our word over his. Or maybe we don't want to believe that there are still people out there who think so little of us as women. Too many are treating this as just another day's headline, as if our outrage is overblown or unwarranted, as if this is normal, just politics as usual. But New Hampshire, yeah, be clear, this is not normal. This is not politics as usual.
It's interesting.
It's such an honor to call her the First Lady. And we were talking about integrity and true elegance. I mean, she spoke up about how women feel about being demeaned. And we've all talked about girls walking down the street. But Donald Trump has taken it to a different height. And this last exposure, this last woman that came up was a porn star. Beautiful woman, but he offered her $10,000. And she
According to
turned
what
him
she
down.
said.
Well, I mean,
I'm just saying it from the standpoint of they
I'm
put
not
it
gonna
out
argue
there.
about it. I'm just saying here, this is the 11th woman coming forward with a story. I mean, that's a good class action suit. We're not going to litigate that here. What I'm just saying, there's where there's smoke, there's fire. We know about, we just had exposure to these two black women being interviewed in Queens who years ago in the 70s were turned down housing by Trump's dad. And right next to his dad, he told the agent, you know I don't rent to the N-word. And the guy was quite explicit in how, how Trump's dad taught him how to treat people.
Correct.
All right?
Yeah.
So we know he's a racist. And Queens during those days was notorious for being racist against black people.
Queens.
The whole cotton picking country.
I mean, I'm saying, but Queens in particular
That's
was
where some of
noted
us are
as
trying
being,
to escape to.
I mean,
Right. You couldn't get an apartment in some parts of Brooklyn, as I recall.
that was the worst of all the boroughs.
See, and the thing with that housing piece is that was subsidized housing. He was getting federally funded monies for housing and denying black people housing.
That's why the feds
That's
came
the
after
same
him.
thing we had with Levitt when he built Levittown in Long Island. When my father came home from World War II, they said, we don't sell houses to niggas. All right? Because Levitt was protected by the federal government in building in an area that was traditionally segregated. Trump was getting federal monies to build housing and denying people. It's not that there was no admission of guilt or they settled it. No, your company, along with the others, was cited because you were discriminating against people with regard to housing. It wasn't a simple thing that it was settled. No. They were guilty of what they were doing. That's why their name wound up on the federal document.
Doc, initially before you got here, we were talking about President Obama and his makeup and how he's endured the 8 years of racism and having accomplished all that he's accomplished. He's gotten a lot of flack from all of us. I took particular offense to how black people have treated him. And Leroy brought up the fact that he wasn't really of our culture.
I didn't say that. I implied that, but I didn't say that.
Okay.
I implied that, and I had somebody accuse me of something because I said one thing, they interpreted that I implied it, and they were right.
Okay.
But I say that in honesty to you and the audience.
And I said
here, 'cause
it's
I'm
a
not-
good reason for him being born in Hawaii. That's why he's as cool as he is.
No.
Well, the different
Hawaii,
culture. you can-
Hawaii has a revolutionary past, an oppressive past, that if he
in
grew up
comparison to being in the hood where Michelle Obama was raised. Now, we just show a girl from South Side of Chicago with all the elegance in the
then
world.
maybe Michelle Obama is the reason he's been able to withstand
We know
all
that.
the pressure and
Of
insight.
course, that was my
we
next
don't
point.
know that. That's
Of
for
course, I said
our
the loving
analysis.
energy he gets in his home is what keeps him alive
She got
and sane.
more than loving energy. She sat down and talked to the brother after
course.
days.
Well,
hey,
that's
look,
what you have a wife for. She's the wind beneath his wings.
Finish your statement.
the thing, you see, the perfect union, one of the aspects of a perfect union is when the wife understands the nature of the work environment that
Yeah.
the husband goes through. So that's what we see there with Michelle Obama and President Obama. Because she's experiencing by ear, by sight, the same things he's going through. So when she talks to him at night, it's one of support, it's one of motivation, one of consoling, it's one of reconfirmation of not only who he is, but who the enemy is.
Right, that's it, exactly
So,
right.
That's where I was going with that. That's
Well,
the perfect.
I think him not being of our culture, of the city life, and having that laid back feeling of Hawaii, I think his marriage, taught him his heritage. So the combination of the two is what we have here, President of the United States.
Nancy Reagan was very defensive and protective of her husband in what he was dealing with when he was in the White House. And nobody had a derogatory statement to make about her, as when Michelle said she was finally proud to call herself an American after all these years. You see, the bigots can't understand that statement, nor can they relate to it. There was another president who had a stroke, and I can't remember his name, and this is all going back 100 years. His wife ran the White House.
Talking about Eleanor Roosevelt?
No, not Roosevelt, before Roosevelt.
Okay.
I can't remember the president's name. He had a stroke. She ran the office of the presidency, and no one could get in to see him. And I was watching this on a documentary. She said, I'll get the paperwork to him, and she would take it in, and she would come back. But he had had a stroke, and nobody knew. And this woman literally ran the country until he could get back on his feet. And it was something I had never heard before, but it was in a documentary I was watching recently. This is over 100 years ago. So when your wife is there as the buttress, as the person who helps sustain you through the fight, that's who Michelle is.
That's right.
She's not taking no shorts, and she's not going to allow somebody to disrespect her husband in private or in public.
Well, she does as a lady should. But my whole point of bringing these subject matters up is for all of us as black men. We've all had the win. Professor Jeffries has Rosalind Jeffries, which has been his backbone, his backup. And he's learned to flourish over the last 50 years he's been married. And he's a classic example of how to keep a happy home. And, relatively happy. I mean, how happy are all of us? And I have a happy home because I have a powerful female.
Is that true, Bev?
Yeah. Well, come on, shout, baby.
Yeah.
But, using the president as an example of how to survive almost any job that you have, and to come out and still be unscathed by your struggle. But I think our criticism of him has been lethal, I think, at times, being I mean, he's family to me. I mean, true family. I feel like I'm related, not only color-wise, but, spiritual-wise. All right?
Yeah, you look like some Obama connection.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
That's right.
However, these are the issues we need to raise, and we need to raise them seriously. But if we do not deal with what I say every time I have a chance to appear in any venue where there's transmission of some knowledge, you got to have a systems understanding. And we just came back, Rosalind and I, from a fantastic conference in Syracuse that was the regional conference of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations. And a couple of months ago, we were in the Gambia to be a part of this international conference on slavery, reparations, colonialism, and African culture. And of course, we had a chance to play the double role with my making my statement on economics and politics and her making her statement on culture and our deep values. So you're right. It is beautiful when there's a partnership that you can share the knowledge as you're explaining. But the key foundation for you and me and everyone is understanding that duality that you have a foundation. That's your biogenetics. You had nothing whatsoever to do with that. It's what your mother contributed and your father contributed in that mix that produced those 46. Those chromosomes that come in that one cell, that's what you've inherited from your family tradition. But in order for you to be somebody of significance or to avoid being devastated, you have to have a formation. So on that pyramid analysis that I use, you have your formation is what you inherit. You have to appreciate what your inheritance is. But you can't be what you should be unless there is a formation. No one grows up in and of themselves. They grow up with processes and concepts of, I call it CAPS, concepts that you're somebody, or analysis that they hook you in with your grandfather, or this one. Concepts, analysis, processes, and systems are what the formation is all about. If your family is broken, you're going to be in a deficit situation. If you are physically not up to the full interplay of what you need to be about, you're in a deficit situation. If you're in a culture of white supremacy that has built into it over the last 500 years, or whenever white folks started snatching Africans out of Africa, you have the system up against you. So in order for you to deal with the system, there has to be some system foundation that you build on. And for us, it's been kept from us. It is the African way, the African culture that has allowed us to survive the devastation of enslavement, being pulled out of our villages, and some instances by our own people, meaning people that look like us, and being sucked into forts and dungeons that the Europeans put up all around the coast of Africa to process you out of your humanity, and then crossing an ocean for weeks and months where you are in that dehumanizing process, and then reach the new world, so-called, where they actually have you on a block, auction block, like you were a bale of cotton or you were a horse being traded. So this dehumanizing process that we've all been subject to, whether we understand it or not, has had to have what I call the African reserve to allow us to survive it. And so in order for us to continue to grow and develop, we survived, but in order for us to continue to grow and develop, we need to have an African process of enhancing that. You saw not just a first lady. That first ladiness is in the American context. What you saw was an African queen mother. That's in the tradition of all of the African groups. That particular woman who, with her experience and her training, can step forth at the right time and make the statement that has to be made. And she's done that not only in this instance, but when he was going through school. He could have gone on the wrong path, and he, in some instances, was heading on the wrong path. He was at City College for a year, working with NIPERG. But when she came into his life, he had a clear direction, because she's coming out of the African formation, the African-American formation, the struggle and whatnot. So she stepped ahead of him into the white world and negotiated. She went to Princeton. That's the whitest of the whitest schools that you're going to get. And then that's your introduction to upper-level whiteness. And then she went on to Harvard to go to the finishing school of whiteness. So she had actually experienced this type of misdirection and miseducation following her brother. And so she learned from her brother's directions or misdirections. And so when she was ready to relate to him, she already had a foundation in African struggle, and she has the dignity and understanding that certain women have to step forth and be that special person. And she made sure that when she went into that White House with those two little angels, she didn't bring in a nanny from Sweden. She brought in her queen mother, the one that's the foundation of her. Her mother was brought into the White House. So you have to be able to see her as, this is nothing new. She's been doing this all along. And if Obama did not have the luck of having an African experience like we had growing up, wherever we grew up, and he came out of the socialization of a white mother and then the acculturation of a white grandparents, it's amazing we got what we have from him. We have to give her more credit than we think, because his African father from the continent could not, and was not able to put his African hands on him. He gave him his African genes, but not the value system, not the understanding, not the sense of mission, purpose, and direction.
What are you saying?
I'm
That
saying
he
that you have
lacks
to see.
blackness?
No,
What are you trying to say? He's not black
the
enough?
process. You have to be so. I'm what I am because the process was started with my grandfather on my mother's side, my grandfather on my father's side, and my mother, and the woman that raised my father, who was his older sister. That process, those queen mothers made us. My mother made the direction that I was going to be in. I ain't had nothing to do with it. I'm 5, 6, 7 years old.
Yeah.
I was already on my path. I have the palm card she designed for me to give speeches. I would win all the oratory contests because the young kids were not up against just me. They were up against me and my mother. I have the palm card where we're talking about emancipation, the struggle in the Civil War, all these little things that I would read when I was 10 and 11 years old. That's the formation that you have to have if you're going to be somebody. So the foundation that we inherit from our people, has to be complemented with a formation. Now, unfortunately, for most of us, we get a Negro formation. And at one point, we put an N, capital N on the Negro. But in order for us to be who we are, we had to have an African formation. You have to be Africanized. She represents an African queen mother to me. She's way beyond the First Lady. Because when she steps out of that White House, she's going to be a former First Lady.
Yeah.
But when she steps into that world and takes on the great responsibility she's going to have, she's got to do it as an African
So what
queen mother.
happens to Obama after he leaves the White House? Go back to Chicago and become a community organizer?
They're
with
staying
Farrakhan?
in D.C.
For the education of the child.
Yeah,
Yeah.
their last daughter, they're going to
Well,
stay.
he'll be
But-
traveling.
But they're building his library, and the plans are there. Some of my best buddies are working on that, for his library, which will be in Chicago. So he most likely will find a more permanent home in Chicago. But he has to decide, how do you take the experience of having an African continental father and having a European mother and having the experience of struggling in Black America and being the unusual first Black president?
He
has
didn't
to decide
struggle
where,
as a black man in America?
No, I'm saying he has to decide what does he want to do with that experience.
You know, being black
and being a
is-
former president, he's
being-
going to be under the control of the
Being
system.
black, I mean, with all your system analysis, being black in America comes to a very individual take on it. You know, we all come with the same color, but we advance with it however way we can. So if you're given just a picture, if you're black, you have to deal with being black. And all of us deal with it individually, and how we can survive.
But
Now,
in-
Obama has dealt with it with, he tells us about his grandparents they used to be afraid. You know, they were afraid of black people. But I think he
Which
took
grandparents? The ones that raised
the
him in
white
Hawaii.
grandparents.
Okay.
The white
But he also had a stepfather from
Right,
Indonesia.
Indonesia.
And so he's had various experiences. So
Yeah.
he comes
Well,
with a
as
complex.
he's still a black man
right.
with experiences, part of, you know,
Right.
past our narrow-minded experience of just being in a black environment.
Mm-hmm.
You learn parts of the world. I remember leaving here in 1960 and being exposed to different parts of the planet. And I came back to Harlem and I had a different eye-opener, you know. Going to Europe and experience European whites in comparison to the crackers I raised up in the Marine Corps was a complete eye-opener for me.
That's not
I went to Denmark and I said, what?
That's not professional for you to be talking about white folks as crackers.
Well,
We have a more
that's-
professional term. We call them crackerzoids.
I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps. I met none but plain crackers, okay? Well, that's my experience. And I didn't like, if he came up to me with
Like
a southern
Trump.
accent, like Trump is a northern cracker.
Oh, the crack.
But that's just a pet name for racists, that's all.
Right.
But I think it's advantageous to get to know different kind of white people instead of just white supremacy ruling your life and what all the negativity that we've survived from, that 400 years of mental slavery also. Now we're in mental slavery now. The only person that can lead us our own way has to have completely our culture. Or how about a blend of all cultures? There's one race, the human race. And we as black people should understand that more than anybody else.
Well, we're the source of culture.
We're
in
the source
world.
of life.
We're the source of culture in the
Now,
world.
you understand our culture, the system analysis of humankind. Black people have always been spiritual. We are the spiritual people of the planet.
Correct.
Okay? So we should be very forgiving of white supremacy, because it's ludicrous. Because God is real.
Which
All
means
right? Which means that,
you said we should be very forgiving.
of
And then you said
white
something-
supremacy.
Yes.
Because
Why?
of the fact that we are superior. We're
No.
How do you rate yourself
No.
superior? How can you rate yourself superior or say we are superior?
Because I'm spiritually superior.
No, you can't. You
We-
cannot rate yourself spiritually superior to anything when you're a human being in a physical form, and you're not the God spirit. How
Am
can
I
you say
not
you're
a
better?
child of God?
That is a subjective
Am I not a child
term.
of God?
I don't know. Are you?
You know me. You know
Everybody-
me well enough to know I'm a child of God.
Well,
I'm human.
you're human, and everybody
And
else
I
is
display
human.
my humanity in every chance
Hold
I
it.
get.
Every spiritual
let's
by
go-
loving the God in you.
People
Hold it.
have
Let's go get
different
the-
levels of
Let's go get the
spirituality.
boxing gloves so this
know?
can be done.
People
in a
have
What?
different
What?
levels
form.
of spiritual
I'm
growth
talking
and
about
understanding.
spirituality being superior to white supremacy. You don't feel that we as black
Spirituality is a
people
vague
have
term. That could be anything. When you talk, that could
God
be demonic.
consciousness.
It could be demonic.
How about God consciousness?
God,
If you
Satan has God consciousness.
If you put a definition,
We got all God and the devil in us. It's
If
all
you
the
put a
same,
definition-
same energy.
you have to put a
the two
definition.
cannot coexist in one. No, you don't have God
it
and the
does.
devil in you. No, you
Of
don't.
course you do.
No, you're not.
You're the
no,
swing
you
of
don't.
the pendulum.
No, you're
It
not.
goes good or evil.
No, you
You
don't.
have a choice.
You
to
have
choose good or
choice.
evil.
Choice and presence are two different things.
It's all the same.
It's not the
energy.
same. Don't
It
tell me
is the
white
same.
is black and green is and up is down.
It's just different shades
No,
same,
it
of
is
the
not.
same color.
No, it is not.
Professor?
Well, they had a fantastic presentation at the conference in Syracuse by Brother Mfadishi. And he was giving us interpretations of Kemetic culture and whatnot. And up was down and black was white. I mean, in other words, he had done this whole thing. I mean, I'm still reeling with how I can adjust to that. For example, he was saying the Nile River begins in the heartland of Africa, the
Right.
Great Lakes
And it
region,
goes down.
flows
It goes
and
north.
flows up
No.
That's right.
north.
Right.
But that's from the highland, so it's really gravitationally going down to the sea.
Right.
But white folks come to the delta, and then they get the first cataract, and they call it the first cataract, when it's really the sixth cataract. The first cataract is in the heartland of the Sudan. So he was saying that we've been the victim of someone else taking history and plugging it into their system, and so we have to understand what they did, and we have to understand what has to be done if the truth is going to be realized.
All right.
So that philosophically,
What about my theory about us being superior as far as spirituality?
I don't like to use the term superior.
No.
I like to use it. I know
You
that
use-
we are spiritual.
but you use white supremacy.
We are spiritually centered, and it appears clear
Okay.
from the beginning of humanity because we somehow, we learned to survive in the universe and the laws of the universe. And that's why Sheikh Anta Diop, our great scholar, had talked about people of the sun who have to live in a river valley and have to understand its overflow, have to harmonize with that overflow, so they have to read the stars. That value system creates a centrality of spirituality as opposed to the cave value system where you're surviving
Me, myself, and
for
I.
day and weeks and years and decades and thousands of years in the cave environment. So the spiritual centeredness that would allow you to see the harmony in the universe or the contradictions in the universe and work them out does not come in the cave. You spent all your life in a cave, there's going to be a misformation of your understanding of the full universe. So these are the deep questions we need to raise. We're legitimately raising them. because our people need to deal with them. They can't just go to a church and somebody gives them a little pat phrase and whatnot and leave it at that. You got to struggle with what all these things mean. But I say we are the spiritual-centered people, but everybody who's human is spiritually centered. But having come out of the values and the culture that we have a deeper well to call upon. I don't like to use the term superiority because they do that to you and I all the time. When I was trying to deal with the curriculum and talk about the truth, and the truth can come only if we seriously study it. And I'm saying that the truth is that the African populations are the original populations of the planet.
Yeah, that's right.
And then, but everybody was saying, he's a racist, he's talking about black people being superior. They can only think in terms of superiority and inferiority. And I'm saying primacy. Africans have been on the planet longer than others.
And in terms of what you're saying is, and what has been said here, when you talk of self, when you make a declarative statement, Black Lives Matter, for them it means white lives don't matter.
No.
That's how they think.
That's how they see it.
That's how they think.
Right.
So when you say the black man is the original man on the planet, they flip it around. We become defensive, not you. We become defensive, some people around you. Well, maybe you should change it. We become defensive of the truth. When I say defensive, they come back with their counter argument, like Leibowitz, what's the woman? You know what I'm talking about. The lady that came
Lefkowitz.
with Lefkowitz. And no, we have to hold true to what we know, or what we're beginning to know about ourselves. Going back to Trump and Ms. Clinton, for me, this is a beautiful time for black people to sit back and study what is coming to the surface. These are the people that we've been following, that we've championed. We followed them on Apprentice. Wow, what's going to happen next week?
Did you
Now,
ever
all the
follow
dirt.
Trump? You always knew Trump was nothing? I mean, come on.
You and I knew that,
Well, we're New Yorkers.
my brother.
He's always been jive.
Brother, I'll divert to this. When you said earlier that what has bothered you is the criticism that President Obama has received from black people, I don't know about that. I know about that among thinkers, among people who are looking at what could be done but wasn't done. But you don't see anything in Amsterdam, you don't see anything in the Daily Challenge, you don't see anything in
I'll just say from right here, this table I'm sitting at.
No.
I'll just talk about us.
You made a
And how-
general statement.
No, I'm talking about how we criticize. I
Well,
mean,
the
the
thing-
four of us.
Criticize and critique are two different things.
And it's, the criticizing comes from Negroes, a Negro mentality of envy and jealousy. Critiquing comes from people who want to see better for their child, and I'm not equating Obama to a child, better for their child, and the child can interpret it as, oh, you criticizing me. No, I'm critiquing what you are and are not doing. White supremacy, by the way, is real as long as we believe in black inferiority.
That's okay.
And when
All
we
right.
stop believing in
That's
it,
it.
it no longer
That's it.
has the energy.
That's why I brought up the fact that
The spiritual piece,
that's why I
we
brought
are
up the spirit.
the moral consciousness
Okay, the moral
in America,
consciousness.
if not in the entire world.
I
And it's
feel
proven
that
out.
is a spiritual superiority.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, see,
As far as
but
I'm
we have
concerned.
to teach our children and our families that it's not just a passing thing. What Martin Luther King has carried into the history, the experience of black people in America, that is a study, because here was a spiritual, quote, a spiritual person coming on the spiritual base, and he was killed. He was killed for Vietnam, but he was.
Let me do
see,
this. The last few minutes we have,
All right.
I want to put on Martin Luther King. I mean, this most influenced me in life.
Yes,
This
sir.
man here. This is my Jesus. Black Jesus.
Jesus was black, period. He's
He
not a
looked
black
like me.
Jesus. He was
And he
black.
looked like me, an Ethiopian.
Isaac Hayes is not a black Moses. Moses.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
I don't think any of us can be satisfied in the United States until that war is brought to an honorable end and America.
You know, I mean, that every time I hear this, I mean, used to be a time I couldn't watch this without tears coming to my eyes, you know, because I saw a man that really sacrificed himself. I mean, and following all the rules, you know, playing it to the letter. I've seen God. God has told me that we're going to reach the promised land, and to have him murdered the next day. You know, I mean, there's a man close to God.
Moses gave the same message.
We're not.
No, what I'm saying is this. That
Deal with King.
Well, I am dealing with King. That context comes out of the book of Exodus, where Moses was allowed to view the land, but he was not allowed to enter into the land.
Because
And
he murdered
Moses
somebody.
gave instructions to Joshua before they went in and before Moses died. He gave them specific instructions. He apparently knew, like Moses, he wasn't going to live to see that. But a plan was laid out. And what's not played in this tape is the financial piece that he discussed that night, telling them to put their money in the black banks, take their money out of the white banks and put it in the black banks and do business amongst black people. They never played that part of his speech. So the instructions were given. Just as Moses gave, Moses didn't get to the promised land, and we're still making our way through somewhat of the wilderness experience. But the analogy is there. Moses and Martin viewing the promised land the night before their death.
Doc?
The importance that I see in this is not just his statement, but pointing us to the prophetic portion of the Bible and taking a current event and putting it right in that blueprint. It's not a force, it's a circle into a circle, not a circle into a square, not trying to fit something that doesn't fit. Right. When you take a look at it, it fits, and then you have to pay attention to everything around it.
And clearly,
in my opinion,
this particular manifestation of his level of spirituality has to be seen as you study him. You can't. You got to see him studying as being raised as a child. You got to see him in the university. The ideas that affect. You got to see him. You have to see the transformative aspects of his life. You can't just freeze him one place or freeze Malcolm X one place and then you make a definitive statement. He was told by the system of white supremacy that we're going to take you out. So it'd be better for you to do it to yourself. And he told them to kiss his whatever, and he made this statement that has been riveting through white supremacy ever since. And if we look at the complete thing, we need to forget about the dream. He was saying, we're in a nightmare. Control your, don't eat white bread. Go get some other, I mean, he was in the banks, save your money. And those are the things that Booker T. Washington, others were saying. We need to look at the messengers that we've had and pull that meaningful message together. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad had a message. Take care of your economics. Take care of your family. Restructure yourself for development and not for survival under a system of super exploitation. So we have yet to be able to sit down and try to go through these things. Hopefully, Dr. Ron Daniels, who every 4 years has set up a situation where after the election, we meet for almost a week to decide what can be done or what should be done now that we know who's going to be dealing with this section of white supremacy. The whole system is white supremacy. But Trump and the people backing him would be dealing with it differently. So there has to be a strategy. And Hillary Clinton is still the system. She doesn't change the system. Obama didn't change the system. See, that's where we, a blackface in a white power place does not change the system. But we have to be ready to neutralize this system as much as we can, economically, politically, and culturally, and then take from it and start building the foundations of our own system of development. Now, that's going to be a contradiction because you're in the system of white supremacy, and how do you build your own system? But the most important thing about us, that we're part of a global family of African peoples. That's a billion plus. With our cousins, that's several more billion. And so as we project where we need to go, we need to see ourselves as a global people and not just as people under the contradictions.
Not a minority.
That's right. And the contradictions of an American Constitution, which was never designed to free African peoples, which was never designed to give the Native Americans their proper rights, which didn't give white women significant rights. The Constitution was set up by rich white men with property and power. So here you have this enormous contradiction happening right before us. Here's one of the richest white men who passed the myth that he's worth billions of dollars. And then here you have one of the power brokers, and him and her husband and her actually got into the system of white supremacy where they are now worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So we need to study them as part of the system, not as polar opposites. And so we need to come up with our own strategy of dealing with this. And the strategy has to be, like Frederick Douglass said, if there is no struggle, there's no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom yet deprecate agitation are men who want the crops without plowing up the ground. They want the rain without the thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, it may be a political one, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you've found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong, which will be imposed upon them, and these will continue with either word or blows. We have to meet and say, if we do not get our fair share in the system and you do not neutralize the worst aspects of it, there'll be nothing for nobody. And all we have to do is make a declaration. We don't have to do anything else but a declaration. Stock markets and everything else will be shaken to the ground. So instead of us meeting to decide what little bit of crumbs we're going to get, we need to meet to decide how we're going to impact the system in meaningful ways while we also build our own system based upon our foundation and our ideas.
No chance of working with the system, huh?
Abraham Lincoln said in his Gettysburg Address, he spoke about whether or not the Union would survive the Civil War. And he spoke of a nation of the people, and there's also, what is in the Constitution, of the people, by the people, and for the people, should not perish from the earth. People don't ask themselves, who are they talking about? Of, by, and for. This was the Constitution of the United States, formulated by rich white men who were mostly attorneys and landowners, not white men, landowners. This was their corporation that they set up. These were their rules, and they were the shareholders of the corporation. So when you talk about of, by, and for the people, that doesn't include black people, doesn't include women, doesn't include the indigenous people who were here before they got here.
Or poor whites.
The men that set up the corporation, a government is a corporation of, by, and for the people that established that corporation.
Well,
they
the
are
point
the shareholders.
is that this all has to be changed. And how do we change it? I mean, it's good laying out the problem, but I want to hear solutions.
I think we need to change ourselves in the way that we think.
Yeah, you change your mindset.
And
You know,
part of
white
that change
supremacy is
is
just a-
not to white eyes, but to African eyes.
Okay, I
And
don't
then
think we need to leave this continent to change
I
things.
think Ron
I think we
Daniels
can do it right here.
Ron
Matter of fact,
Daniels
I'm going to throw up the fences in Harlem and take over Harlem. All right?
say this.
I'm going to start right there.
Well,
My revolution going to start right in Harlem. I'm not going back to Africa.
November the 16th
Because they got
to
too
the
many
20th.
problems over there. I
Well,
talked to
there are
Gimme
problems
this week.
everywhere. There are
And
problems
Gimme
everywhere.
is voting for Trump.
He should, because he's not thinking.
There are
man.
two announcements.
Don't say that.
Two announcements,
We don't have
Brother
enough time.
Gilchrist.
Hurry
One
up.
is Minister Farrakhan is speaking on the elections, on Trump and Clinton, Sunday morning, this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Over NOI.org.
Okay.
NOI.org, Sunday, October 30th at 11, and Brother Jeffries was talking about Ron Daniels.
And the activity that Ron has, which is the state of the race. Every 4 years after the election, they have this, and the person who's going to be the final analysis is going to be Minister Louis Farrakhan, Sunday at the Robert Treat Hotel in Newark, New Jersey, culminating 5 days of
Am I
activity.
videotaping that or what?
Well, we're gonna
thank
try
you
to
for
work it out.
coming. Thank you for coming to the Gilchrist Experience. The God in me loves the God in you, and stay tuned for more interesting topics. Stay black. God be with you. And do it your own way. Peace. Power to the people.
To African people.